Welcome back to the panel discussion, Digital Transformation, the Consumerization of IT, sponsored by Red Hat on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. I'm Jason Miller. My guests are Guy Cavallo, the Deputy CIO for the Small Business Administration, Mark Schwartz, the CIO for the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services in the Homeland Security Department, Mike Hermes, the Chief Technology Officer at the Homeland Security Department, and Adam Clader, the Chief Architect in the Office of the Chief Technologist for Red Hat North America Public Sector. A lot of the discussion we've talked about kind of DevOps and Agile and automation. All this is leading to, and I think we touched upon it in the first segment, mobility and this idea of really going to where your users are, going to where your customers are. I know we've beat that to the horse a little bit. But Mike, start us off, when you talk about mobility, how does digital transformation and mobility really do go hand in hand?
Absolutely. So first of all, I think there was a time when mobility was like, this is a special thing. We have to focus on mobility as this unique segment of technology. We're at the point now where I think most folks are viewing mobility or mobile devices as just another endpoint, right? Now they have to take that into consideration as they build services. The one area, where it's really been a forcing function, I guess there's two areas I would mention. One is it's forced a simplicity in design that has actually benefited cross-platform. You see what's happened with mobile apps is that folks have realized they really like really simple interfaces. It's compelling to have only a few things and a few buttons and to know intuitively what I need to do to accomplish something and not need a help text or something that I hover over to figure out what this thing does. That is very compelling for users, and you've seen that spread from just mobile interfaces to web interfaces as well. And you're also seeing a trend in web interfaces being responsive, so you can have a very similar interface in one format translate to a smaller and smaller format. That's a really important trend. The one area where I think mobile is key and a key differentiator in the digital transformation is that it does provide capabilities that we can build on to provide unique products, as you heard me allude to before, that didn't exist before. By taking advantage of location data, right? By taking advantage of other native services on the phone, you can now provide products and capabilities that never existed before. And I think that's the piece that we have to roll into our thinking as we are exploring those pillars of digital transformation I mentioned earlier.
I think that's right. So many of your apps today, if you have an app for a grocery store, for instance, they want to know where your location is, and they'll tell you, okay, here's the nearest grocery store that, and I think not that there's always the concern, well, does the government need to know where I am? But I think it's more than that, because if you're filling out an application, I'm making this up, Mark, but in California, is that application asking maybe different questions than Nevada or Arizona? I don't know if that plays into your thinking.
Typically not, but an example of a use case for us is if you want to visit one of our field offices to get information, we can tell you which one is closest to you if we know where you are. Or a civil surgeon for some of the medical reports that we need. We can tell you what surgeons are available in your area.
And I think people lose sight of the importance of that additional power that the phone or the tablet gives you. Give me a sense from Guy, your perspective. You made an interesting comment that the mobility is big, but it's more of a tablet mobility than a phone because of the filling out forms and such. How does that fit into your digital transformation?
Sure. Part of, SBA has been around since 1953, so we've probably invented every paper form that a government agency could use. And we definitely look at, we're asking, our citizens are asking us to loan their businesses money. And while we'd like to make it a very simple app, it's hard to do that. But where mobility can come into play is doing that on a bigger tablet. Definitely if we can reduce the amount of information we're requesting, it's less to fill out. But even down to a phone form factor, once somebody has applied for a loan, we're looking at, can we now give them an app on their phone that would allow them to check the status, know if they have any follow-up actions instead of having to go back to a full-size computer to work with that. And like Mark highlighted earlier, we have district offices all over the U.S. Again, if they want to find where their nearest office is without having to go to a website, again, tying that in. I'd love to come up with a great way to fill out a 300-line form on a cell phone easily. I'm sure the 15-year-olds can do it with their two thumbs, but those of us that are older, it would probably take 2 days to fill it out. So some of that we can't overcome, but we're not excluding mobility, just because of the forms that our agency is based on.
The tablet's a key piece because you can definitely fill out a form in that. Mark, jump in.
Yeah, I was thinking that Guy should set an even more aggressive goal, and he should make those forms so simple you can do them on a smartwatch.
All right. Now you're just causing trouble. Now, one of the things is this idea, and I'm going to turn to Mike on this one, is so many of the digital transformation requires the transaction, right? The government has struggled to be transactional. You could get the form, but you got to print it out, or it's a PDF. Do you see that changing, and maybe within DHS or more broadly across government, that the transaction is happening because of digital transformation?
I think I would like to see that. I think there are many obstacles to that happening. I think Mark is actually very familiar with some of them. There are actually laws that make it difficult for us to do some of those things. Ultimately, you do see commercial sector moving in that direction very, very aggressively. Again, it's all about reducing the friction in the interaction between the service provider and the customer. And of course, printing out forms, signing them, doing something else with them is a lot of friction. And so as we look to service those customers, we have to address that problem. Again, some of that is outside of our control right now. We believe obviously there's an opportunity with the incoming administration. They're soliciting ideas for potentially radical changes to things that might make a positive difference. That's something that could be on the table.
Adam, jump in a little bit, because one of the things that Mike brought up was the friction piece. And when you talk mobility is the hope to ease that friction. Are you starting to see that with your federal customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole idea around digital transformation is getting the friction out of IT and how we interact with our customers. One of the interesting things that came up recently, I was at a AFCEA mobile conference, and they're talking about the idea of sort of disconnected mobile devices in theater, right? How do I build an application that's going to work with a warfighter who's not connected to a GSM network, who can't necessarily get that signal back? So building small data centers and interoperating those with a mobile application, and then resynchronizing all of that data when you get back together, these become really significant problems. I know that we've got folks in law enforcement on borders and sort of patrolling some of these things where you're not always going to have that connectivity. So while the mobile devices have a little bit peaked in sort of the feature functionality that we're going to see from some perspective, we'll get more sensors and more capabilities, but we're kind of at our format. I think that sort of the capabilities for disconnected and the ability to do and still be of service inside of a container on a ship. You may not get any signal, but you need to be able to still continue your mission, right? So I think we're going to have to continue to think about those kinds of problems.
Mark, when you are looking at the apps that USCIS delivers to their customers and or users, how does mobile fit into that? How are you ensuring that you're just not developing for the desktop?
As Mike said, mobile's not a thing. The principle I think we all agree on is we have to deliver our services in a form factor that meets the user's needs or the customer's needs. I'm doing what you just did, users or customers. It is true that most of them are on mobile devices, and so of course we need to be able to satisfy them on mobile devices. There are those areas where we can take advantage of some of the other features of the mobile devices, like we discussed, the location, for example. But I don't want to go down the road of building something just to be mobile, just for the sake of being mobile. It's more a question for me of interacting with users and what's the best way to do so.
Guy, I want to shift over to this idea of workforce culture change. We talk a lot about when it comes to technology, and you and I talked about it just briefly early on when I asked about, you said, well, we're going to change, we're going to move to the cloud, we're going to ask people to change the way they've been doing things. How has SBA really faced that culture change to get people to think differently?
It definitely is a challenge, but I found that anytime you have that type of transformation, you have to have leadership from the top, support from the top. We have a new administration on board, a new administrator. Marie and I have spent a lot of time updating her on where we are, and the prior reputation of our office was not great. And so we have not only a change in culture, but we have to change the whole perception and understanding of, are we a valuable contributor to the mission of the agency, or are we a hindrance and something to be avoided? And again, it's something that I see technology groups go through quite a bit. What we're doing is, again, setting a clear vision. Here's where we're going. explain for business reasons why we're going to the cloud, why we're getting out of the data center business, why our teams need to be retrained and reskilled on the new technologies that we're implementing now, and then putting money and effort behind that. We have a daily cloud stand-up meeting every day. I attend 90% of those, and I'm not hosting one of the cloud teams, but I'm the executive sponsor. So while I have 100, like any government executive, I have 100 other meetings I could be at, I'm showing the team every day, this is how important it is that I'm going to take time to see where we are on our stand-up and where all of our teams are moving. We actually have 3 different Agile teams operating at once, and then 5 teams operating under the cloud. And so they've seen that transformation. I said, I brought in cloud experts to work side by side with the team. I'm not sure about my coworkers here, but that's always a friction point when you introduce somebody who has new skills and you have somebody that's been there for a while. And we found by Marie and I both supporting it so strongly that friction's reduced. And my one story I always tell them is, this is a great learning opportunity. We could send you to a 3-week class and you can sit at a keyboard, but you got an expert right next to you that can interact and help you use the cloud at SBA and learn from them. And I'm seeing the teams do that.
It's interesting that it goes back to that simple thing of communication, understanding the vision, where it's going. Mike, generally speaking, this idea of digital transformation, many agencies, DHS, SBA, and just to name the 2 that are at the table, are definitely jumped off the cliff and are on their way. Where do you see digital transformation going? You know, if we have this conversation in a year or 2 or 3 from now.
Yeah, I hope we didn't jump off a cliff, but we're certainly trying to move aggressively in this space.
Up the hill.
You know, first of all, let me just say, I think what Guy alluded to is a concept that you know, we talk about change management a lot, but what you really need is change leadership, right? You need strong leadership to push some of those changes. And one of my favorite quotes, you know, is from Ed Catmull, the president of Pixar, that talks about how really people are naturally good problem solvers. They're naturally creative, but it's the processes and the organizations and the management sometimes that prevent folks from actually innovating. And so, put it another way, the biggest thing we can do to encourage innovation and transformation at the staff level is to give them explicit permission to innovate. And that's one of the things that change leadership, I think, has to accomplish. In terms of where we want to be, you know, in several years, there's 2 dimensions to that. One is kind of more tactical, which is I want to see us evolve up the maturity chain on, have a higher level of maturity for things like Agile and DevOps. We need to make significant progress there. I don't want to be having these same conversations about how we're struggling to get there 2 years from now. But at a higher level, I want to see technology and what it can do for an organization acknowledged and elevated inside the organizational hierarchy. So it is no longer simply you know, mops and brooms, as my previous boss used to like to say, but that we are part of the strategic conversation about how technology enables the mission at every level. And that has to be weaved into many areas that it's not currently weaved into. And I would like to see in several years that we've made that progress.
It still amazes me when I hear someone, when you talk that way, like, why isn't it? Like, everything we do is technology. Nobody goes, well, let's put that on paper and then we'll make copies and pass it around. Mark, tell us where we're going to be in 2, 3, 4 years.
Well, I'm looking forward to an era where we can make our projects much smaller. You know, I really think this is a deeper problem maybe than most people realize. We tend to build these humongous IT programs that are extremely expensive and extremely risky. And I think DevOps and user centricity and all these other things we've been talking about give us the ability to shrink the size of projects, do them quicker, and then move on to the next thing, and thereby do them with much less risk, much lower cost, and much quicker time to market.
And I think the time to market, you mentioned velocity a couple times in the discussion around lower risk. You're seeing that already in many ways, the lower risk and the velocity, just based on your work in Agile and DevOps to go to transform.
For sure, that's the benefit that comes very quickly when you go in that direction.
Absolutely. Adam, take us home. You heard we had this a great conversation about digital transformation. What are your takeaways? What should the audience take away? And then what trends are you seeing and where the government's going?
Absolutely. So I think mission, customer identification, all of that becomes critically important when we start to talk about digital transformation. I think looking forward down the path, we're seeing a huge shift at the government level, moving into cloud providers, which I think is a great move. I think automation becomes an important part of that, which we spoke about. One of the things that I'd like to see people really planning for as they make this movement into cloud is, how do I plan my move out of that cloud into my next cloud provider, right? I'm very concerned about this idea of agencies getting locked into a single cloud provider and no real way to get out of those handcuffs. So think about how you move to your next cloud, and maybe to the next cloud beyond that, or even build an application in this new DevOps lifestyle that is in multiple clouds at one time. I think that idea of multiple cloud application hosting needs to be come a little farther to the forefront of our thinking, whether that be for availability. Sometimes clouds go down, and that's not very good for our applications, or whether it's for the financial impact of just being able to make a decision based on who's the best cloud provider for you today.
And you didn't bring up cyber, but I know that was marble didn't throw it off. All right, well, very good. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. This has been an excellent conversation. Let me thank our guests, Guy Cavallo, the Deputy CIO at the Small Business Administration, Mark Schwartz, the CIO at the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services at the Homeland Security Department, Mike Hermes, the Chief Technology Officer at the Homeland Security Department, and Adam Clater, the Chief Architect in the Office of the Chief Technologist for Red Hat North America Public Sector. I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the panel discussion, Digital Transformation, the Consumerization of IT, sponsored by Red Hat on federalnewsradio.com and 1500 AM. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search Red Hat.
On behalf of Red Hat, thank you for joining us. A link to the archive session will be sent to you shortly. If you requested a training certificate, you will also receive an email with download instructions after the webinar. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.